The fluorescent lights hummed above the Lincoln Elementary School auditorium, a space usually filled with children's laughter but now crowded with restless adults for the monthly PTA meeting. Folding chairs scraped against the polished floor as parents settled in, clutching coffee cups and notepads. Some leaned forward eagerly, ready to argue about budget allocations and new after-school programs. Others sat with weary expressions, wishing they were anywhere else. The scent of old varnish clung to the air, mixing with the faint aroma of pastries from the refreshment table. Anthony Green adjusted his collar as he stepped inside, his tall frame drawing subtle glances. His dark suit was crisp but understated, the kind a man wore when he wanted to look professional without standing out too much. To most in the room, he was just another parent, Jordan's father, a man who worked long hours but showed up when it mattered. To those who really knew him, Anthony carried himself with a quiet gravity, as though he was always analyzing, always one step ahead. What nobody in this room suspected was that beneath the calm exterior, Anthony was more than a dad. He was an FBI handler running one of the most delicate operations in the state. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was here for his son. Jordan Green had been struggling at school, bright but easily distracted, sometimes misunderstood by teachers who didn't look beyond the surface. Anthony promised himself he would speak up at the PTA, not just as a father but as an advocate for children like his boy. He clasped Latoya's hand as they walked toward the front row, their son trailing just a step behind, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. The meeting was already buzzing. Principal Karen Doyle, a brisk woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and a voice that could cut through a storm, tapped the microphone and called for order. Parents shuffled into silence, papers rustling, phones silenced. Anthony was about to sit when a voice, low but commanding, cut through the air like a knife. "Hold it right there." Anthony froze. Turning, he found himself staring into the narrowed eyes of Officer Brian Keller. The cop leaned casually against the doorway, but there was nothing casual in the way his hand hovered near his belt. Keller was known in the community, broad-shouldered, crew-cut, a man who carried authority like a weapon. He was in uniform tonight, though he wasn't on duty for the school. His presence alone raised murmurs among the parents, some exchanging confused glances. Anthony tilted his head slightly, his voice calm. "Evening, officer. Something wrong?" Keller's lips curled into a faint sneer. "Funny question. You mind telling me what business you've got here?" Anthony blinked. "This is a PTA meeting. My son goes to this school. I think my business is pretty clear." But Keller didn't move. He shifted his weight, blocking the aisle like a sentry. "Parents, huh? Got a lot of those tonight. Some belong here, some don't." The room stilled. Latoya's hand tightened around Anthony's. Jordan looked up at his father, confusion and unease written across his young face. Anthony forced his voice to remain steady. "My name is Anthony Green. My wife and I are here for our son, Jordan Green, 7th grade. We're on the attendance list, I'm sure." "Names don't mean much," Keller said. His tone was sharp, laced with a quiet hostility that made every syllable sting. "Seen a lot of people use excuses to walk into places they don't belong." Principal Doyle's brow furrowed. She stepped forward, microphone forgotten. "Officer Keller, this is highly irregular. All parents were invited tonight." Keller didn't take his eyes off Anthony. "With all respect, Principal, security's my concern. I'm not comfortable letting just anyone walk into this meeting without checking them out." A murmur rippled through the room. Clarence Miller, a respected PTA member with a calm baritone, rose from his seat. "He's telling you the truth, Keller. Anthony's been here before. He's part of this community." Keller shot Clarence a look that silenced him instantly. "I'll decide who's part of the community." Then, turning back to Anthony, he let his gaze drop briefly to the man's suit, as though searching for something hidden. "So what do you really do, Green? Doesn't look like the kind of job where you got time for bake sales?" Anthony's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. Years of training had taught him to mask anger, to read situations like a chessboard. Still, His voice held an edge now. "I don't owe you an explanation about my work. I'm here for my son. That's it." The silence stretched. Keller's hand lingered near his holster, and though he hadn't drawn his weapon, the implication was enough to make every parent in the room sit frozen. Jordan's voice, small but trembling, broke the stillness. "Dad, can we just sit down?" Anthony looked at his son, then back at Keller. He took one step closer, lowering his voice so only the officer could hear. "You're making a scene. Step aside before you regret it." For the first time, Keller flinched. It was slight, almost imperceptible, but Anthony caught it, the recognition that the man before him was not easily intimidated. Still, Keller wasn't about to back down. He straightened his shoulders. "If you've got nothing to hide, then you won't mind stepping outside with me. Couple of questions. Shouldn't take long." LaToya gasped. "This is harassment." Principal Doyle's voice was firm now. "Officer Keller, this is not the place. If Mr. Green is on our list, and he is, then he has every right to be here. If you have concerns, you can take them up after the meeting." Keller's eyes narrowed. His authority had been challenged, and in front of an audience. He opened his mouth to retort when another figure appeared behind him. Officer Daniel Mercer, younger, leaner, with a tentative expression. Mercer placed a hand on Keller's shoulder. "Brian, let it go. He's fine. You're overstepping." But Keller shrugged him off. "Stay out of it, Mercer. You don't know who we're dealing with." Anthony's eyes flickered briefly. Mercer's hesitation was telling. Keller's words weren't random. He suspected something. And if Keller was sniffing around too close, it meant Anthony's carefully constructed cover might be in jeopardy. The sting operation he'd been running for months relied on anonymity. Exposure could blow everything. Anthony drew in a steadying breath, then spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the auditorium. "My name is Anthony Green. I live on Jefferson Avenue. My son Jordan is enrolled in 7th grade. My wife LaToya volunteers in the library. We're here for the PTA. Now, Officer Keller, if you can't accept that, maybe the rest of these parents should know why you're so determined to keep us out." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Keller's face reddened. He wasn't used to being challenged publicly. His grip on authority was slipping, and everyone could see it. He leaned forward, his voice low and venomous. "Watch yourself, Green. Men who mouth off usually regret it." Anthony didn't blink. "So do men who abuse power." The tension was unbearable, thick as smoke. Parents shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Clarence Miller stepped forward again, his voice calm but resolute. "Let him through, Keller. This isn't about security, it's about pride." Finally, Keller stepped aside, but not without a lingering glare that promised this wasn't over. Anthony guided LaToya and Jordan to their seats, his back straight, every movement deliberate. He could feel the eyes on him, the whispers that followed, but he ignored them. He'd won this round, though he knew the war was far from finished. As he sat, Principal Doyle cleared her throat, flustered but determined to regain control. "Let's continue with the meeting. We have important matters to discuss." But for Anthony, the meeting had already changed. The sting he'd been orchestrating from the shadows was now tangled with his personal life. And Keller's suspicion was no accident. The officer had stumbled onto something far larger than a PTA dispute. Anthony's cover was slipping, and the danger was only beginning. The PTA meeting dragged on with a strained stiffness, every agenda point muffled under the lingering shadow of the confrontation. Principal Karen Doyle's voice trembled only slightly as she ran through budget proposals, but the audience wasn't listening. Their eyes flicked toward Anthony and his family, then toward the back of the room where Officer Keller stood with his arms folded, jaw clenched, daring anyone to call him out. Anthony sat with his hands clasped, his posture calm, but inside his mind was calculating. Every glance, every whispered exchange between parents, every flicker of Keller's stare was logged and filed away. The operation he had been quietly managing required absolute discretion. The moment suspicion fell on him, the delicate network of informants and undercover work could crumble. Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dad," he whispered, his young voice filled with unease. "Why was that cop acting like that? He made it sound like you were a criminal." Anthony leaned closer, placing a steady hand on his son's knee. "Some people judge without knowing the truth. What matters is, we know who we are, and we don't let anyone shake that." His tone was firm, but his chest ached at the look in Jordan's eyes. Children weren't supposed to carry this kind of fear. LaToya sat stiffly beside them, lips pressed in a tight line. She didn't speak during the meeting, but Anthony felt the tension radiating from her. He knew there would be questions once they got home, questions he couldn't keep dodging forever. When the meeting finally adjourned, parents filtered out with a mix of forced smiles and murmured gossip. Clarence Miller approached Anthony, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You handled yourself with dignity tonight. Keller's been throwing his weight around for years, but he picked the wrong man this time." Anthony offered a polite nod. "Appreciate that, Clarence." Clarence lowered his voice. "But he's not going to let it go. Be careful. Men like him don't back down easy." Anthony met his gaze, steady and unreadable. "Neither do I." The Green family house sat on the edge of town, a modest two-story with a tidy lawn and a porch light that flickered occasionally. It was the kind of home meant to blend in, offering comfort without drawing attention. Anthony had chosen it deliberately, a place where neighbors waved politely but didn't pry too much. LaToya set her purse down on the counter with more force than necessary. She turned on Anthony the moment Jordan went upstairs. "What was that tonight?" Anthony loosened his tie, sighing. "You saw what it was." Keller flexing his authority in the wrong place. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play it down. He didn't just question you. He came at you like he knew something, like he was testing you." Anthony paused, choosing his words carefully. "He was fishing. That's what men like him do." LaToya crossed her arms. "Anthony, I've stood by you through a lot. Long nights, phone calls you can't explain, trips you say are business. But tonight, in front of everyone, a cop acted like you were more than just a father at a PTA. So tell me, what exactly are you hiding?" The silence stretched. Anthony met her eyes, his own expression softening. He wanted to tell her everything, to share the burden he'd been carrying for months. But the rules of his job were carved into his bones. Secrecy kept people alive. Secrets had kept her safe. "I'm not hiding from you," he said finally. "I'm protecting you." Her voice trembled. "Protecting me from what?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "From things you don't need to get pulled into. Trust me, LaToya. Keller doesn't know the truth, but if he digs too deep, it could put us all in danger." LaToya shook her head slowly. "Danger from him or from you?" The question stung. Anthony swallowed hard, unable to answer. Upstairs, Jordan's footsteps padded across the floor, a reminder of what was at stake. Across town, Keller sat in his patrol car outside a dimly lit diner, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. He replayed the PTA meeting in his mind, Anthony's defiance echoing like an insult. Most men backed down when Keller leaned in. Green hadn't. Mercer slid into the passenger seat, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "You're still stewing about him, huh?" Keller's jaw clenched. "Something's off about that man. He's too calm, too polished. Did you see the way he looked at me, like he knew more than he should?" Mercer sighed. "Or maybe he's just a dad trying to sit through a boring meeting." Keller shot him a glare. "You're too soft, Mercer. Guys like Green don't just blend in. He's hiding something. I can feel it." Mercer shifted uneasily. "You're chasing shadows, Brian. You'll get yourself in trouble." But Keller leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I don't care. I'll find out who he really is. And when I do, he won't be so smug." The Green household was quiet when the phone rang. Anthony slipped downstairs, careful not to wake LaToya or Jordan. He picked up on the first ring. "Green." The voice on the other end was crisp, authoritative. "This is Collins. We have a problem." Anthony straightened, his professional mask snapping into place. "Go ahead." Word's getting around. Keller's been sniffing at you. He's asking questions in the department, pulling records he shouldn't. If he connects the dots— "He won't," Anthony interrupted. His tone was firm, but inside, tension coiled tight. Collins exhaled. "You're running an active informant network. If Keller blows your cover, we lose more than just you. We lose half the operation." "I'll handle it." There was a pause. "You better, because if you don't, Washington will. And their way won't be as forgiving." The line went dead. Anthony lowered the receiver, staring at the silent phone. His cover was cracking faster than he'd expected, and if Keller wasn't stopped, the sting would collapse, along with the lives tied to it. The next morning, Jordan lingered at the breakfast table, pushing cereal around his bowl. LaToya busied herself at the sink, while Anthony read the newspaper with studied calm. Finally, Jordan spoke. "Dad, why do the cops hate you?" Anthony's paper stilled. He lowered it slowly, meeting his son's eyes. "Not all cops hate me, just one who thinks he knows me when he doesn't." Jordan's brow furrowed. "But why? You don't do anything wrong." Anthony reached across the table, his hand firm on Jordan's. "Sometimes doing everything right still makes you a target. What matters is standing tall, even when people try to push you down." Jordan studied him, sensing more beneath the words. Anthony could see the questions forming, the same curiosity that made his son bright but restless. Questions Anthony couldn't answer. Not yet. Later that week, Anthony drove into the city under cover of night. He parked in a garage 3 blocks from the federal building, exiting on foot to blend with the late commuters. Every step was precise, every glance measured. He slipped into a small office suite above a pawn shop where a handful of men and women sat around a table strewn with files. Collins was there, his graying hair cropped short, his eyes sharp as ever. "You're late." Anthony removed his jacket, dropping into a chair. "Had company at the PTA? Keller nearly exposed me." Collins' expression darkened. "He's a liability." Anthony shook his head. "Not yet. If I push back too hard, he'll know he struck a nerve. I need to control this without drawing heat." The youngest agent, Ramirez, frowned. "What if he digs deeper? What if he pulls your file?" Anthony leaned forward, his voice low but unwavering. "There is no file. As far as Keller knows, I'm just a dad with a job he can't quite place. That's what keeps him guessing." Collins studied him for a long moment. "You're playing with fire." "I've handled worse flames." The room fell silent. On the table lay a folder with surveillance photos, grainy shots of men exchanging envelopes in parking lots, coded transcripts of conversations. Anthony tapped one photo, his expression hard. "Our informant says the shipment moves next week. If we don't nail this, Keller won't be our only problem. We'll be dealing with a storm that makes him look small." Collins nodded grimly. "Then you'd better keep Keller in check, because if he connects you to this sting before we close it, we lose everything." Meanwhile, Keller sat in front of his computer at the precinct, eyes bloodshot from hours of searching. He typed Anthony Green Jefferson Avenue into the system again, pulling up public records, mortgage, vehicle registration, a driver's license photo. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. He leaned back, frustration gnawing at him. Men like Green didn't live squeaky clean lives without leaving cracks. He was sure of it. Yet every search ended in a dead end. Mercer appeared at the door. "Still on this?" Keller growled. "There's something wrong with this guy. I'll prove it." Mercer shook his head. "Or maybe you'll ruin your career chasing a ghost." But Keller only smirked. "Then I'll ruin it. Better than letting a liar walk free." That night, Anthony sat on the porch, the glow of his cigarette ember the only light. LaToya joined him, wrapping a sweater around her shoulders. "You're distant, Anthony. You come home, but you're not here." He exhaled smoke, staring at the dark street. "I'm trying to keep this family safe." Her voice broke. "Safe from what?" "I can't protect Jordan if I don't know what we're facing. And tonight at the meeting, he looked at you like you weren't his dad anymore, like you were someone else." Anthony turned to her, pain etched in his features. "I'm still me. I'm still his father. But there are things I can't tell you yet. If I do, it puts you both in danger." Tears welled in her eyes. "And if you don't, you're already losing us." Anthony's chest tightened. He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back, retreating inside. He was left on the porch, alone with the night, the weight of his secrets pressing heavier than ever. In the darkness of his patrol car, Keller watched the greenhouse from a distance. His engine idled softly, headlights off. Through the curtains, he saw shadows moving, the silhouette of a family trying to live in peace. He clenched his jaw. "You're hiding something, Green, and I'll find it." The hunt had begun. The days following the PTA meeting settled into an uneasy rhythm, the kind where every ordinary moment carried a weight that threatened to tip. Anthony walked Jordan to school in the mornings, exchanged polite greetings with neighbors, and drove to his office like nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, every step, every glance over his shoulder was sharper. Keller had marked him, and once men like Keller decided you were a target, they didn't stop until something snapped. In the grocery store line, Anthony caught Keller's patrol car idling across the street, headlights off, but presence unmistakable. When he took Jordan to basketball practice, Keller appeared again, leaning against a lamppost, pretending to check his phone. The officer never approached, but his stare clung to Anthony like a shadow. LaToya noticed, too. One evening, as Anthony hung up his jacket, she whispered, "He's following us. Why?" Her voice carried a tremor she tried to hide. Anthony pressed a kiss to her forehead, though his own heart thudded with tension. "Because he thinks he's chasing a story. But stories are dangerous when the ending isn't what he expects." Jordan, perceptive in a way only children could be, asked questions that cut deeper than he realized. "Is he watching because you're in trouble, Dad? Or because he's the one in trouble?" Anthony forced a smile, but the question lingered long after Jordan had gone to bed. Keller's obsession grew more brazen. At the precinct, Mercer warned him, "You're crossing lines, Brian. You don't have a warrant. You don't have cause. You're running on gut." Keller smirked. "My gut's never wrong. Green's not who he says he is." Mercer leaned closer, voice low. "Or maybe he is, and you're about to burn your badge chasing paranoia." Keller didn't flinch. "I'll burn it if it means exposing him." That same night, Anthony sat across from Collins in a dimly lit diner booth, the smell of burnt coffee and fried food hanging heavy in the air. Collins studied him over his glasses. "Keller's asking questions outside the department now. He went to a county clerk, pulled records that should have been sealed." Anthony stirred his black coffee, his jaw set. "He's testing the edges. If he pushes further, he'll find holes." Collins tapped the table with 2 fingers. "Your cover holds only as long as they don't know what you're really doing. The informants you manage are nervous already. If Keller shines a light, we lose them." Anthony's eyes flickered toward the window where headlights passed in the rain. "I can keep him guessing. He wants to know who I am. I'll let him think he's close without ever touching the truth." Collins shook his head. "That's a dangerous game." Anthony leaned back, voice steady. "It's the only one I know how to play." Back in the suburbs, LaToya grew restless. She began noticing small things she had once ignored. Anthony's unmarked folders tucked into the bottom drawer of his desk, the coded calls he took late at night, the way his eyes always scanned a room before entering. One evening, when Anthony stepped outside to take a call, she opened the drawer. Inside were papers she couldn't fully understand, receipts, contact notes, names written in shorthand. But what struck her most was the envelope stamped with a government seal tucked beneath the pile. She replaced it before he returned, but her hands shook as she poured herself water, the question rising louder. Who exactly had she married? The strain bled into their conversations. At dinner, LaToya pressed, "If you're protecting us, then why do I feel more exposed than ever?" Anthony's fork paused midair. "Because danger doesn't always knock. It circles until it sees a way in." I'm making sure it never finds the door. Her eyes searched his face. Or maybe it already has. Keller escalated his tactics. He pulled Anthony over one evening on a quiet stretch of road, flashing lights piercing the darkness. Anthony rolled down his window calmly. Keller leaned close, flashlight beam cutting across Anthony's face. License and registration. His voice carried no courtesy. Anthony handed them over, steady. You've got no cause. Keller smirked. You look nervous. Something I should know? Anthony's voice was cool. Nervous isn't the word. Tired is. Keller studied him a long moment, then returned the documents. One day that mask will slip, and I'll be there when it does. He walked back to his car, leaving Anthony staring into the night with his jaw clenched. The following weekend, Anthony attended another PTA committee session. Parents debated over playground repairs, but the tension was palpable. Keller appeared again, off-duty, but looming in the back of the auditorium. His eyes never left Anthony, even as Principal Doyle cleared her throat nervously and pushed through the agenda. When the meeting adjourned, Clarence Miller caught up with Anthony. He's circling you like a hawk. Folks are starting to wonder what this is really about. Anthony met Clarence's gaze, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy. They'll know soon enough. For now, let them wonder. Late that night, Anthony drove out to a remote warehouse district where an informant awaited. The man, jittery and pale, whispered, "Word's out the cops are asking about you. You sure we're safe?" Anthony steadied him with a look. "You're safe as long as you keep feeding me the truth. Keller's a distraction. Focus on the shipment." The informant nodded, though unease lingered in his eyes. Anthony filed it away. Fear was spreading, and fear could unravel everything. Meanwhile, Keller pored over Green's life with relentless fixation. He spoke to neighbors, canvassed old addresses, even approached a retired officer who once worked with federal task forces. "Ever heard of Anthony Green?" Keller asked. The man shook his head, then frowned. "Strange. With a name like that, I'd remember." Keller smiled tightly. "Exactly." The turning point came on a rain-soaked Thursday. Anthony returned home late to find LaToya waiting in the living room, her arms crossed. She held the envelope she'd found days earlier, her expression unreadable. "I couldn't ignore it." Anthony froze. She placed it on the coffee table. Federal seal, classified markings. "You're not who you say you are." Anthony sat slowly, his hands steepled. "I'm still your husband. I'm still Jordan's father. That's the truth." LaToya's voice cracked. "But there's more, isn't there?" He exhaled, the weight of years pressing against him. "There's always been more. I handle people who risk their lives giving us information. Informants. They trust me to keep them alive. That's why I've been gone at nights. That's why Keller's circling. He smells something he can't name." LaToya's eyes widened, tears threatening. "You're with the FBI." Anthony didn't confirm aloud, but his silence was louder than any admission. She covered her mouth, shaking her head. "And you brought all of that into our home." Anthony reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I thought I could shield you from it, but it's bleeding into our lives. Keller won't stop until he breaks me, and if he breaks me, the people I protect die. That's the cost of this work." LaToya's tears finally fell. "And what about us? What about Jordan? Do we just become collateral damage in your secret war?" Anthony's throat tightened. He had faced war zones, stings gone wrong, informants lost in alleys, but nothing pierced like the sight of his wife's breaking trust. Upstairs, Jordan lay awake, listening through the thin walls. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough to know that his father wasn't just the man who helped him with homework and shot hoops on Sundays. His father was someone bigger, someone dangerous, and that terrified him. Across town, Keller leaned over a map sprawled across his kitchen table, pins marking Anthony's movements from the past week. Grocery store, basketball practice, late-night drives. He muttered to himself, "Nobody lives this clean. Nobody." His eyes narrowed on one pin, an unmarked warehouse. A slow smile spread across his face. Gotcha. Anthony stared out the window that same night, watching rain streak the glass, knowing the storm was only beginning. The rain had eased by morning, leaving the streets slick with reflections of gray clouds. Anthony drove Jordan to school, forcing a smile as his son chattered about basketball practice, though the boy's voice carried a hesitance he hadn't had before. Anthony caught it in the rearview mirror, the way Jordan studied him, as if seeing him not as a father but as a stranger wearing his father's face. At the school drop-off, Keller's cruiser was parked across the street. The officer leaned against the hood, sipping coffee, his gaze fixed on Anthony like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Parents ushering their kids inside whispered nervously, sensing the tension. Anthony lowered the window slightly, locking eyes with Keller. For several seconds they held the stare, unblinking, until Keller tipped his coffee cup in a mock salute. Anthony rolled the window up without a word and drove away. By the time he reached the safe house later that day, his pulse was steady, but his mind churned. Inside, Collins was waiting with Ramirez and another agent. The air smelled faintly of dust and stale coffee, the table cluttered with photographs and coded transcripts. Collins didn't waste time. Keller followed you to the warehouse last night. Anthony froze. How close? Ramirez slid a photo across the table. It showed Keller's car parked 2 blocks away, lens aimed through the windshield. Close enough to know we're watching something. Anthony exhaled slowly, pressing his palms against the table. If he connects me to this sting, we lose every informant in the network. Collins leaned forward, his expression grim. Washington is watching. If Keller compromises this operation, they'll shut it down and you'll take the fall. Anthony's jaw tightened. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance. That evening, Keller's fixation deepened. He replayed the photos on his computer, zooming in on Anthony's figure entering the warehouse. He scribbled notes furiously, whispering to himself, "You're no PTA dad. You're something else, and I'll prove it." Mercer entered, shaking his head. "You're running yourself ragged. Internal Affairs is going to ask questions if they find out you're tailing a man with no charges." Keller didn't look up. "IA won't matter when I show them who Green really is." Mercer stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What if you're wrong?" Keller's eyes flicked up, cold and certain. "Then I'll deal with it, but I'm not wrong." Meanwhile, at the Green household, LaToya's silence was louder than any argument. She prepared dinner mechanically, her thoughts elsewhere. When Anthony entered, setting his briefcase by the door, she didn't turn. "How long can this last?" He paused. "How long can what last? This double life?" She faced him now, eyes glassy. "One moment you're a father at a PTA. The next you're in warehouses at night, taking calls from men who sound like they hold your life in their hands. And Keller, he's circling us like we're prey. Jordan's scared, Anthony. I'm scared." Anthony approached slowly, his voice low. "I didn't choose Keller. He chose me. But if I break now, everything collapses. The people I'm protecting, the informants, and what about protecting us?" Her voice cracked. "What good is saving others if you lose your own family?" Anthony's shoulders sagged. He wanted to promise her safety, to swear Keller would never cross the line. But promises were fragile things, and tonight he couldn't bring himself to make one he might not keep. Jordan overheard fragments of their voices from the stairwell, his young hands gripping the railing. He slipped back into his room, clutching a basketball against his chest like a shield. His world, once simple, was unraveling, and he had no way to stitch it back together.
Keller made his next move 2 nights later. Anthony was returning from a late meeting with an informant when red and blue lights flared behind him. He pulled over calmly, lowering the window. Keller approached, flashlight slicing through the darkness. "Evening, Green. Out late, huh?" Anthony kept his tone measured. "Just heading home." "From where?" Keller leaned closer, his breath hot with the scent of coffee. "Work." What kind of work has a man dressed like that sneaking around warehouses? Keller's voice was taunting now, designed to provoke. Anthony's jaw clenched. You've been following me. That's harassment. Keller smirked. Funny word, coming from a man who never explains what he does. You think you're clever, but clever men slip. And when you do, I'll be there. Anthony met his stare. You're chasing shadows, Keller, and when you realize it, you'll have nothing left but regret. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Keller stepped back, rapping the roof of Anthony's car. Drive safe, Green. He returned to his cruiser, leaving Anthony gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. At the safe house the next morning, Collins studied him closely. He's baiting you. Don't let him. Anthony's eyes were hard. I won't. But if he pushes Jordan or LaToya into this, I'll end it my way. Collins's voice sharpened. That's not your call. You play by protocol. Anthony leaned forward, his voice low and firm. Protocol doesn't sit at my dinner table. Protocol doesn't tuck my son into bed. If Keller crosses that line, it's not about protocol anymore. It's about survival. Collins didn't argue, but the look in his eyes said everything. Anthony was teetering too close to a line the Bureau didn't want crossed. Keller's obsession spilled beyond the job. He started showing up at the grocery store where LaToya shopped, leaning casually near the produce section, pretending it was coincidence. He lingered outside basketball practice, his presence a silent threat Jordan couldn't ignore. One evening, Jordan whispered to his mother, "Why does that cop hate us?" LaToya pulled him close, her voice breaking. "He doesn't hate us. He just doesn't understand us." But even she didn't believe the words. Anthony confronted Keller outside the school one afternoon. Parents bustled past, but the tension between the two men froze the air. Anthony stepped close, his voice a whisper edged with steel. "You go near my family again, we'll have a problem you can't fix with a badge." Keller's grin was thin, dangerous. "Already looks like we've got one. Maybe I'm just waiting for you to slip and prove me right." "Or maybe," Anthony said softly, "you're already wrong and you're too proud to admit it." Their eyes locked, each man unwilling to blink first. A bell rang in the distance, children pouring out of classrooms, breaking the moment. But the threat lingered, thick as smoke, neither man could breathe through. That night, LaToya sat at the edge of their bed, staring at the floor. "You're going to war with him, aren't you?" Anthony rubbed his temples. "I don't want war, but he's forcing my hand." She shook her head slowly. "And when he drags us all into it, who wins then?" Anthony had no answer. Collins called again the following morning. His tone clipped. "Washington's concerned. Keller's name has come up in reports. If he compromises you, we'll cut ties. Do you understand?" Anthony gripped the phone, his voice steady. "You cut me. You cut every informant relying on me to keep them alive. That's blood you'll wear." Collins paused. "Then find a way to neutralize Keller without burning yourself." The word neutralize echoed long after the call ended. Meanwhile, Keller scrawled notes furiously at his kitchen table. Maps and photos spread like a shrine to obsession. His mutters filled the empty room. "You're not clean, Green. You're not just a dad. I'll expose you, and when I do, no one will save you." Mercer knocked at the door later that night. Keller opened it, eyes wild with exhaustion. Mercer glanced at the mess of papers, frowning. "This isn't normal, Brian. You're spiraling." Keller jabbed a finger at a photo of Anthony leaving the warehouse. "That man is lying to all of us. I won't stop until the world knows."
Mercer hesitated, then lowered his voice. "And if you're wrong," Keller's expression hardened, "then I'll still be the only one willing to ask the questions everyone else is too scared to ask." At the greenhouse, LaToya tucked Jordan into bed, smoothing his blanket. He whispered, "Mom, is Dad in trouble?" She hesitated, brushing his hair back gently. "No, baby. He's just fighting a battle you can't see, but he's fighting it for us." Jordan's eyes, wide with fear and admiration, stayed fixed on her until sleep finally took him. Anthony stood outside the doorway, listening, guilt pressing heavy against his chest. He had fought in silence for years, but silence was no longer enough. Keller wasn't just threatening his cover, He was tearing at the fragile seams of Anthony's family. Anthony stepped outside into the cool night, staring at the dark street. Keller was out there somewhere, circling like a wolf, and Anthony knew wolves didn't stop hunting until they were brought down. The city was restless that week, the air thick with the kind of tension that seemed to settle before a storm. Anthony drove through back streets instead of main roads, his eyes sweeping mirrors, catching glimpses of headlights that sometimes disappeared, sometimes lingered too long. He knew Keller was close. The officer's presence wasn't just harassment anymore. It was surveillance, calculated and relentless. Inside the bureau's safe house, Anthony laid a folder across the table. Informant notes, coded calls, and surveillance images spilled out. Collins stood with arms crossed, watching him with a stern expression. "They're spooked," Anthony said. "Half of them don't want to meet until Keller backs off. He's circling too tight." Collins leaned in. "Then you need to calm them down. If one of your informants bolts, the pipeline collapses." Anthony's voice sharpened. "You think I don't know that? Keller isn't just nosing around. He's planting fear. My people don't trust uniforms to begin with, and he's proving why." Ramirez shifted uneasily in his chair. What if Keller isn't working alone? What if someone inside fed him just enough to make him dig? The suggestion hung in the room like smoke. Anthony's jaw flexed. He'd considered it himself, that maybe Keller wasn't just running on gut instinct. Maybe he had a nudge. But who? The Bureau was supposed to keep the sting airtight. Collins cut in. "It doesn't matter where he's getting his fire. What matters is that you put it out before it spreads. Keep your informants steady. Keep Keller guessing. And for God's sake, don't let your family become leverage." Anthony closed the folder slowly. "They already are." At school, Jordan walked down the hallway clutching a backpack that felt heavier than usual. Friends whispered behind his back, some repeating things they'd heard their parents say. "Isn't your dad in trouble with the cops?" one boy blurted. Jordan's face flushed hot, his fists clenching, but he didn't answer. By the time he got home, LaToya saw it in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked gently. Jordan muttered, "They said Dad's gonna get arrested." His voice cracked. LaToya knelt, holding his shoulders. "Listen to me. Your father isn't what they say. He's fighting something bigger than they understand." Jordan's eyes filled with tears. "But if he's fighting, doesn't that mean he could lose?" LaToya forced a smile, though her own chest ached. "Not your father. He doesn't lose. Not when it comes to you." Behind them, Anthony stood in the doorway, silent. He had heard every word, and it cut deeper than any threat Keller could make. His son's faith was brittle now, a fragile thing he had to protect as fiercely as any informant. That night, Anthony drove to a meeting point under an overpass. His informant, a gaunt man with jittery hands, sat in the passenger seat, eyes darting nervously. "Word is, Keller's asking about me too," the man whispered. "If he figures out I'm talking, I'm dead." Anthony's voice was calm but firm. "Nobody knows your name but me." Keller's guessing in the dark. The informant shook his head. "He's getting close. People are saying you're not who you pretend to be. They're scared of getting burned." Anthony leaned closer, his tone sharp. "You tell them this. Keller is noise. He's not the fire. The fire's coming next week when that shipment moves. You stay steady, and when this is over, you'll be clear." The informant's breathing slowed slightly, though fear still lingered in his eyes. "You promise?" Anthony nodded once. "I don't break promises." What he didn't say was that Keller's shadow was creeping into every corner. One wrong move and the entire sting would collapse, not just for him, but for the lives tethered to him through whispered deals and coded calls. Keller spent his nights building a wall of obsession. His apartment had become a war room, maps pinned with red string, photos taped across walls, names scrawled on notepads. His reflection in the window was pale, sleepless. Mercer stepped inside one evening, taking in the chaos. "You're unraveling, Brian. This isn't policing anymore, it's stalking." Keller jabbed a finger at Anthony's photo pinned to the center. "This man is lying to all of us. You don't see it, but I do. He's hiding something too big to ignore." Mercer rubbed his forehead. "Even if he is, It's not your job to chase it like this. You've got no warrant, no case. You're setting yourself up for a fall. Keller's eyes burned with conviction. Then let me fall. But if I bring him down with me, it'll be worth it. Mercer sighed heavily, shaking his head as he left. But Keller didn't notice. His world had narrowed to one man, one obsession, one truth he was determined to expose no matter the cost. At home, LaToya found herself at a crossroads. She stared at the envelope still hidden in her dresser drawer, the government seal burning into her thoughts. She wanted to confront Anthony again, to demand every detail. But another part of her hesitated. Knowledge was a dangerous weapon. If she knew too much, she became part of the war. That night she asked quietly, "If Keller corners you, what happens to us?" Anthony met her gaze, his voice heavy. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to keep you out of it." Her heart pounded. "And if whatever it takes breaks you?" Anthony didn't answer. The silence was worse than words. Keller struck again at the next PTA meeting. Parents filled the auditorium, trying to mask their unease, but the room carried tension like static before lightning. Keller stood at the back, arms crossed, watching Anthony. Principal Doyle began the meeting, her voice strained as she tried to keep order. Midway through, Keller moved forward, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Funny seeing you here again, Green. You seem to have a lot of free nights for a man who's supposedly working late." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Anthony rose slowly, every eye on him. His voice was calm, but iron lay beneath. "If you have a question, officer, ask it directly. Don't poison this room with innuendo." Keller smirked. "All right. What do you really do, Green? Because no one seems to know. Not your neighbors, not your co-workers, not even your friends here." He gestured toward the crowd. Parents whispered, eyes darting between the two men. Anthony stepped closer, his gaze locked on Keller. "I do what any father does. I protect my family. Maybe that makes me harder to understand than you'd like." For a moment, silence held. Then Clarence Miller stood, his voice steady. "Enough, Keller. This is a PTA, not your personal stage. If you've got charges, bring them. If not, step back." Keller's face flushed. He turned sharply, exiting the auditorium with heavy steps. The whispers in the room grew louder, a tide Anthony couldn't control. He sat slowly, Jordan's wide eyes watching him, LaToya's lips pressed tight. The damage was done. Later that night, Anthony received a call. Collins's voice was low, urgent. "Keller was spotted near another informant's location. He's pushing too close. If he stumbles into this sting, it'll unravel." Anthony's pulse quickened. "Then we move sooner. If the shipment's coming next week, we tighten the net now." Collins hesitated. "You're rushing it." Anthony's voice hardened. "Better rush than ruined." He hung up, staring into the dark. Keller wasn't just a nuisance anymore. He was a wrecking ball swinging toward everything Anthony had built. LaToya couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the dim glow of a lamp. When Anthony entered, she whispered, "If Keller destroys you, what do we do?" Anthony rubbed the back of his neck, weary. "You don't let him destroy me. You stand with me." Her eyes filled with tears. "And if I can't? If I'm too scared?" He sat across from her, his hand covering hers. "Then you remember why I do this. Not for secrets, not for the Bureau. For you. For Jordan." But deep down, both knew fear was winning ground. Across town, Keller sat in his cruiser, eyes locked on Anthony's house. The lights inside flickered off one by one until only the porch lamp remained. Keller muttered into the darkness, "You can pretend all you want, Green, but I'll be the one who rips the mask off." His obsession had become a promise. The shipment was only days away, and the city pulsed with an undercurrent Anthony could feel in his bones. Every alley, every idling car seemed alive with unseen eyes. He tightened his routines, memorized new routes, and checked his mirrors with military precision. But even the sharpest preparation couldn't blunt the chaos Keller's obsession was stirring. That evening, Anthony left the safe house later than usual. He turned down Jefferson Avenue, headlights cutting through drizzle. Half a block behind, a familiar pair of headlights lingered. Keller. Anthony gripped the wheel tighter, his jaw hardening. He slowed near an intersection, hoping Keller would pass. Instead, the cruiser slowed too, a shadow that refused to peel away. Anthony pulled into a gas station, stepping out calmly. Keller's cruiser idled at the curb. Anthony filled the tank, eyes scanning reflections in the glass of the convenience store. Finally, Keller stepped out, leaning casually against his car. "Long night, Green?" he called. Anthony didn't look up. "Some of us work late." Keller smirked. "Work? That what you call sneaking around warehouses?" Anthony capped the pump, turning slowly. "If you've got something on me, charge me. Otherwise, stop following me like a stray dog." Keller's grin widened. "You don't want me following because you're hiding something, and I'll find it." Anthony stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Or maybe you're just jealous. Maybe you need me to be dirty because it makes your own badge feel clean." The words struck. Keller's face darkened, his jaw tightening. For a moment, Anthony thought the officer might lash out. Instead, Keller straightened, his voice ice. "Enjoy your night, Green. It won't last." Anthony watched him go, every muscle taut. Keller wasn't bluffing anymore. He was hunting. At home, LaToya noticed Anthony's silence deepen. He ate without tasting, answered without speaking. That night, when she pressed gently, "What's coming?" he finally met her eyes. "The shipment moves soon. If we close it right, it ends. If we don't, Keller's obsession won't just burn me, it'll burn everyone tied to me." LaToya's throat tightened. "And us?" Anthony reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'll never let it touch you. That's why I fight so hard." But LaToya shook her head. "It already touches us. Jordan can't sleep. I can't breathe without wondering who's watching. You're fighting shadows, Anthony, but we live in their path." He had no answer, only silence. The next morning, Jordan walked out of school to find Keller leaning against his cruiser at the curb. The officer smiled, too wide, too casual. "Hey, kid, you're Jordan, right?" Jordan froze, clutching his backpack. "Yeah." Keller crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "You know what your dad does?" Jordan swallowed hard. "He works." Keller's grin didn't fade. "That's what he tells you. But sometimes dads keep secrets. Sometimes they're not who they say." Jordan's eyes widened. He turned and bolted back inside the school, heart hammering. Principal Doyle found him trembling in the hallway minutes later when Anthony arrived to pick him up. Doyle's face was tight with concern. "Your son was approached by Officer Keller." "He's shaken." Anthony's chest burned with fury. He placed a steady hand on Jordan's shoulder, whispering, "He doesn't know anything, son. Don't let him scare you." But inside, Anthony's rage was volcanic. Keller had crossed the last line. That night, Anthony dialed Collins with a voice low and sharp. "He went after my son." Collins cursed under his breath. "He's unstable." "He's dangerous," Anthony snapped. "If you don't leash him, I will." Collins's silence stretched before he spoke again. "Do not engage. The sting takes priority. After it's done, we'll deal with Keller." Anthony hung up, staring at the dark window. His reflection looked back, tired, hardened, more soldier than father. Keller's fixation reached fever pitch. He trailed Anthony to a parking lot near the docks one night, camera in hand. Through the lens, he captured Anthony speaking with a man Keller didn't recognize, an informant whose nerves were fraying. Keller zoomed in, snapping photos furiously. "There it is," he muttered. "Secret meetings, proof." But as he lowered the camera, Mercer appeared beside his cruiser. "What the hell are you doing?" Keller smirked. "Catching Green in the act." Mercer's voice rose. "You're tailing a citizen without a case file. This isn't policing, it's obsession. IA will bury you." Keller's eyes gleamed. "Not if I bring proof first. When I show them what he really is, they'll thank me." Mercer stared at him, pity in his gaze. "Or they'll watch you crash and burn, and no one will stop it." Keller turned back to his lens, ignoring him. His world had shrunk to one figure framed in glass, Anthony Green. At the Green household, Jordan's questions grew heavier. One night he sat on the edge of his bed, whispering, "Dad, is what Keller said true? Are you hiding something?" Anthony sat beside him. the weight of fatherhood and secrecy pressing on his chest. Jordan, sometimes we keep things quiet not because they're wrong, but because speaking them puts people in danger. I've never lied to you about who I am. I'm your father. That's what matters most. Jordan looked up, eyes wet. But if you're fighting something dangerous, what if you don't come back? Anthony pulled him close, holding him tight. Then you remember this. I never stopped fighting for you. LaToya watched from the doorway, tears in her own eyes. She knew Jordan's questions were hers too, but unlike her son, she no longer believed silence was safety. Days later, the sting was set. Anthony met Collins in a nondescript van, equipment humming quietly. Maps and photos lined the walls, radios crackling with updates. Collins briefed him briskly. Shipment hits the docks tonight. We intercept, flip the suppliers, lock it down clean. No exposure. Anthony nodded, though his eyes were shadowed. And Keller? Collins sighed. He's already circling the docks. My people spotted him 2 hours ago. He's not part of this, but if he blunders in, then it all burns, Anthony finished. They locked eyes. Collins muttered, keep him away from the fire. As night fell, Anthony slipped into position. He blended with dock workers, every sense sharp. The hum of cranes, the slap of waves against pylons, the stench of oil and salt filled the air. Men moved crates with calculated efficiency, unaware they were steps from collapse. From the shadows, Keller watched too, camera lens glinting under dim lights. His heart pounded as he whispered to himself, "What are you doing here, Green? Who are you?" Through his viewfinder, he saw Anthony gesture toward a container. Seconds later, agents hidden among workers moved into place. Keller's eyes widened. He snapped photos frantically. "I knew it," he muttered. "You're dirty. You're in this." But what he couldn't see was the trap closing, the agents waiting for Anthony's signal to spring. As trucks rumbled closer, Keller stepped forward, leaving the shadows. His hand went to his radio, voice rising. "This is Officer Brian Keller. Suspicious activity at Dock 14. Repeat, suspicious." Anthony's eyes snapped toward the sound, spotting Keller. His stomach dropped. If Keller called in uniformed backup, the sting would unravel in seconds. Informants would vanish, suspects would scatter, and months of work would burn. Anthony moved fast, cutting through crates, intercepting Keller before the officer reached open ground. He gripped Keller's arm hard, whispering with fury, "You have no idea what you're walking into. Back off." Keller's eyes blazed. "You're dirty. I've got you on camera. You're running with criminals." Anthony leaned close, his voice sharp as a blade. "You're about to ruin an operation bigger than anything you've touched in your career. Step back, or you'll bury us both." Keller's breath hitched, caught between conviction and doubt. For the first time, Anthony saw hesitation flicker in his eyes. But before either could move, shouts rang out, agents springing their trap, suspects scattering, crates crashing to the ground. The sting had begun, chaos swallowing the docks. Keller pulled free, his radio clattering to the ground. He stared at Anthony, torn between blowing the whistle and letting the storm unfold. Anthony gave him one last look, then turned into the fray, disappearing into the chaos of men and steel. Keller stood frozen, the truth hanging just out of reach. The docks thundered with sound. Cranes groaned, chains rattled, men shouted as crates hit the pavement. The sting that had been quietly built for months now exploded into motion under the sodium lights. Anthony wove through the chaos, his eyes tracking targets, his earpiece buzzing with clipped voices. Container 14 confirmed, 2 suspects moving. Unit 3 blocked the north exit. Anthony's focus never wavered. Each movement was deliberate, honed by years of training. He signaled to an undercover agent posing as a longshoreman who nodded and guided a suspect into position. But beyond the orchestrated storm, Anthony felt the disturbance like static. Keller. The officer wasn't supposed to be here, and his presence was a fracture running through carefully laid plans. Keller crouched behind a stack of pallets, camera forgotten. He stared wide-eyed as men he thought were dock workers suddenly drew weapons and badges. "What the hell?" he whispered, heart pounding. His instincts screamed he had uncovered a dirty deal, but the longer he watched, the less sense it made. Green wasn't pocketing cash. He was directing, commanding. Two suspects bolted toward the southern gate, shoving aside crates. Keller reacted before he could think, sprinting forward, badge out. "Police, on the ground!" His shout cut across the night. Anthony spun, fury flashing in his eyes. The suspects froze for half a beat, then scattered harder, realizing the sting wasn't as clean as it had seemed. Agents lunged, shouts erupting. "Keller!" Anthony hissed, charging toward him. He grabbed the officer by the shoulder, dragging him behind cover as bullets cracked from the shadows. "You just lit the match." Keller shoved him back. "Don't touch me. You're dirty, Green. I just saw you running this whole circus." Anthony's voice was low, sharp. "You're blind. This isn't corruption. It's federal. You just stepped into the middle of an operation you were never cleared to see." Keller's face twisted with disbelief. "You expect me to buy that?" A bullet shattered wood, inches from Keller's head. Anthony slammed him to the ground, shielding him with his body for half a second before firing back toward the gunman. The suspect fell. Anthony pulled Keller up by the collar. "Believe it or don't, but if you want to walk out alive, you follow my lead." For once, Keller didn't argue. The fight surged around them, agents and suspects clashing in bursts of gunfire and shouts. Anthony moved with the precision of a man who had lived in this kind of storm before. Keller followed, shaken but unwilling to admit it. When the final crate was secured and suspects were pinned, the docks fell into tense silence, broken only by the groans of those arrested. Collins emerged from the shadows, expression stormy. "You almost blew it, Green." Anthony's chest heaved. "I held it together, barely." Collins's eyes shifted to Keller. "And what the hell is he doing here?" Keller stiffened. "Doing my job, exposing this man." Collins barked a laugh, humorless. "Exposing him? He's the only reason this didn't collapse completely? He runs this network. You've been tailing an FBI handler, genius." The word slammed into Keller like a fist. He blinked, stunned. "Handler?" Anthony's eyes bored into his. "You've been so desperate to see a criminal you missed the truth standing in front of you." Keller's face reddened, his breath ragged. For the first time he doubted his obsession. He opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to speak. Collins stepped closer, voice steel. "You will forget what you think you know. This operation stays sealed. If your pride can't handle that, internal affairs will chew you alive before the Bureau even moves." Keller swallowed hard, rage and humiliation warring inside him. But in that moment, under Anthony's unyielding stare, he realized the truth was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. When Anthony returned home that night, LaToya was waiting. She sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, eyes burning. "You're bleeding," she said flatly, nodding to the scrape across his cheek. Anthony touched it, surprised by the sting. "It's nothing." Her voice trembled with fury. "Nothing? Jordan came home today terrified because Keller cornered him, and now you walk in smelling like gunpowder, acting like this is just another night." Anthony sank into the chair opposite her, exhaustion etched deep. "It almost collapsed tonight. Keller showed up at the docks." LaToya's eyes widened. "Then he knows." Anthony shook his head. "He knows pieces, but Collins shut him down." She leaned forward, her voice breaking. "And how long before Keller, or someone else, comes through that door and tears our lives apart? How long before Jordan loses his father to your secrets?" Anthony gripped her hand tightly, voice hoarse. "I can't stop now. If I walk away, everything I've built falls. The people I've promised to protect, they die. And then Keller wins." Tears streaked down her cheeks. "And if you keep going, we lose you anyway." Jordan appeared in the doorway, sleepy-eyed, clutching his blanket. "Mom? Dad?" His voice was small. "Are you fighting again?" LaToya quickly wiped her face, forcing a smile. "No, baby. Just talking." She led him back upstairs, but Anthony stayed frozen at the table, guilt pressing like a weight he couldn't lift. Keller sat in his cruiser outside his apartment, staring at the city skyline. Collins's words replayed in his head. He runs this network. The image of Anthony on the docks, commanding with precision, haunted him. He had spent weeks, months, convincing himself Green was dirty. It had been easier than admitting maybe his instincts had failed. But now, staring into the darkness, he realized his obsession had nearly wrecked an operation bigger than anything he had ever touched. Mercer's voice echoed from memory. "You're spiraling." Keller clenched the steering wheel. He wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. If Green really was Bureau, why hide it so carefully? Why risk his family in the process? Questions gnawed at him, sharper than before. He whispered into the silence. "What are you really hiding, Green?" At the Bureau, Collins debriefed Anthony in clipped tones. The sting held, but Keller's shadow compromised our clean finish. "Washington's not happy." Anthony leaned back, fatigue in his eyes. "Washington doesn't sit across from a kid who can't sleep because a cop tells him his dad's a criminal. Washington doesn't live it." Collins' tone softened slightly. "You chose this life." Anthony's jaw tightened. "No. I chose to protect people, but my family didn't choose to be pawns in Keller's obsession." Collins nodded slowly. "Then you'd better figure out how to protect them before Keller finds another way back in." The next week blurred into uneasy calm. The shipment was seized, suspects locked down, but Keller lingered like smoke after fire. He no longer confronted Anthony in public, but Anthony felt him, always nearby, always watching. One afternoon, Anthony picked Jordan up from school. As they drove, Jordan asked softly, "Dad, is Keller right about you?" Anthony's chest tightened. "What do you think?" Jordan hesitated. "I think you're still my dad, but sometimes you look like someone else too." Anthony swallowed hard. "I'll always be your father first, always." But the boy's eyes betrayed the doubt seeded by Keller's words. That night, LaToya stood on the porch, staring at the dark street. Anthony joined her quietly. She spoke without turning. "If Keller destroys you, what's left for us?" Anthony placed a hand on her shoulder. "He won't destroy me." Her voice was low. "Then what if I'm the one who does? What if I can't carry this anymore?" Anthony's breath caught. "LaToya." She turned, eyes fierce. "You've asked me to trust silence, but silence is killing us. One day, Anthony, I may have to choose between protecting Jordan and protecting you." The words cut deeper than any of Keller's threats. Anthony saw it in her eyes. The woman who had stood beside him for years was nearing her breaking point. Keller watched from across the street, hidden in shadows. He saw Anthony on the porch, saw the weary slump of his shoulders. Keller's camera clicked once, capturing the image. His obsession wasn't over, it had only shifted. He whispered to himself, voice steady now, "You're not just a handler, Green. You're something more, and I'll find it." The days after the sting should have brought relief. The operation had succeeded, the shipment seized, the network destabilized. Yet for Anthony, relief never came. The victory was hollow, poisoned by Keller's interference and the questions it left behind. He felt it in every step, in every glance over his shoulder, the sense that the battle hadn't ended at the docks. It had only shifted. Keller no longer confronted him publicly, but Anthony knew he hadn't backed down. The officer's silence was worse than his outbursts. Silence meant plotting, digging, watching. And Keller was always watching. One evening, Anthony parked outside a diner to meet a contact. As he approached the door, he caught sight of Keller's cruiser half a block down, lights off, engine idling. Anthony forced himself to keep walking, sliding into a booth across from his contact. But the conversation was strained, the man's eyes darting nervously toward the windows. "Word is, Green," the contact whispered, "cops are sniffing around. Some of the guys think you're working both sides." Anthony's voice was calm, measured. "I've never worked both sides. If they're sniffing, it's because Keller can't tell the difference between his pride and the truth." But the contact wasn't convinced. "Pride or not, fear spreads fast. Some of the boys don't want to deal with you anymore. They think you're compromised." Anthony leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Tell them this. If they cut ties now, they'll regret it. I'm the reason they're still alive. Keller isn't their problem. I am their protection. The contact hesitated, then nodded, though unease lingered in his eyes. Anthony left the diner, shoulders tense. Outside, Keller's cruiser was gone, but Anthony knew better. Keller was still circling, his obsession a noose tightening around everything Anthony touched. LaToya felt the weight of it too. At the grocery store, she noticed Keller leaning against the frozen food aisle, pretending to check his phone while watching her. At church, she saw him in the parking lot, his cruiser parked just far enough away to look accidental. And at night, when the street was quiet, she caught glimpses of headlights idling near their home, vanishing the moment she peered through the blinds. She confronted Anthony one evening as he came through the door. "He's following me now, watching me when I shop, when I drive Jordan to practice. How much longer until he knocks on our door?" Anthony's eyes hardened. "He won't cross that line." Her voice broke. "He already has. Maybe not with a badge, but with his eyes, his presence. Jordan feels it. I feel it, and you can't stop him." Anthony's jaw clenched, his silence saying more than words could. Keller's obsession had reached a fever pitch. His apartment looked like a crime scene investigation board. Photos of Anthony pinned across walls, maps crisscrossed with string, notes scrawled in furious handwriting. He muttered to himself, pacing. "You're not just an FBI handler. You're hiding something deeper, and I'll find it." Mercer stopped by one evening, taking in the chaos. "This isn't healthy, Brian. You're not chasing justice anymore. You're chasing a ghost." Keller spun on him, eyes wild. "Green's not a ghost. He's a mask, and masks slip." Mercer shook his head. "And when this destroys you, who'll pick up the pieces?" Keller didn't answer. His eyes flicked back to Anthony's photo pinned at the center. His voice was steady now, almost calm. "I don't need anyone to pick me up, because when I rip that mask off, the truth will speak for itself." The Bureau felt the ripples. Informants who had once trusted Anthony began to pull back. Some missed meetings. Others refused to answer calls. One, panicked and desperate, left a message on a burner phone. "I can't do this anymore. Keller's sniffing, and if he finds me, I'm dead." Anthony listened, his chest heavy. He called Collins immediately. "They're cracking. Keller's poison is spreading. If we lose them, we lose everything we built." Collins's voice was sharp. "Then lock it down. Get them back on track." Anthony's tone darkened. "It's not that simple. They don't fear the criminals anymore. They fear Keller. He's unpredictable, and that makes him more dangerous than the people we're targeting." Collins was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Handle it. Washington won't tolerate excuses." Anthony hung up, fury burning. He was holding up an entire network with both hands, and Keller was prying his fingers loose one by one. At dinner that week, the tension finally broke. LaToya placed her fork down, her voice trembling. "Anthony, I can't keep living like this. Jordan can't either. Keller's shadow is everywhere. We can't breathe without feeling him near." Anthony's voice was quiet. "I'm working to end it." Her eyes blazed. "But what if ending it means ending us? What if Keller drags you down and we're left in the wreckage?" Anthony leaned forward, desperation in his voice. "Then trust me a little longer. Please, I'm fighting for something bigger than him, bigger than me. But I can't fight if I'm also losing you." Tears welled in her eyes. "Maybe you already have." Jordan looked between them, silent, his young face pale. He stood abruptly and left the table, the slam of his bedroom door echoing like a verdict. Anthony lowered his head, the weight of failure pressing hard. That night, LaToya sat awake, staring at the envelope still hidden in her dresser. The government seal glared back at her. She thought of Keller's lingering eyes in the grocery store, of Jordan's whispered questions, of Anthony's silence. For the first time, she wondered if protecting her son meant exposing her husband. Her hands trembled as she touched the envelope. She whispered into the darkness, "What if the only way to save us is to end this secret?" Keller made his boldest move yet. He visited Principal Doyle at her office under the guise of a security check. His tone was polite, but his words carried weight. "You ever wonder about Anthony Green? About what he really does?" Principal Doyle frowned. He's a parent. He's active in the PTA. That's all that concerns me. Keller leaned in slightly. Men like him don't just show up without reason. I think he's hiding something that could put this school at risk. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious claim, officer. Do you have proof? Keller's smile was thin. Not yet, but I will. Doyle's voice was firm. Until you do, this school is not your playground. If you have evidence, bring it. Otherwise, stay out of our halls. Keller left with clenched fists, rage simmering. He had expected Doyle to bend. Instead, she had pushed back. It only deepened his determination. Anthony discovered Keller's visit days later when Doyle pulled him aside after a meeting. He's asking about you, suggesting you're dangerous. I told him to leave, but parents talk. You need to know the ground is shifting. Anthony's chest tightened. Thank you for telling me. Doyle's eyes softened. Whatever you're caught in, Green, I hope your family makes it through. Her words echoed long after he left. Keller's obsession climaxed when he trailed Anthony to another meeting with an informant. He snapped photos, recorded audio, even whispered into his recorder, "Green meeting with known players. He's not clean." But this time, Anthony spotted him. He ended the meeting quickly, then doubled back, intercepting Keller in a dark alley near the docks. Anthony stepped from the shadows, his presence sudden, startling. Keller froze, hand near his holster. Anthony's voice was low, dangerous. You're killing people without even knowing it. Every time you follow me, every time you snap a photo, you're painting targets on informants' backs. They're scared, and fear gets them killed. Keller's jaw clenched. Or maybe they're scared because you're dirty and they know it. Anthony took a step closer, their faces inches apart. You want the truth? Fine. I work for the Bureau. I handle informants. I keep them alive while they hand us the criminals you'll never touch. That's the truth you're too blind to see. Keller blinked, thrown. For a moment, doubt flickered, but pride was stronger. If that's true, prove it. Anthony's voice hardened. I don't owe you proof, and I don't need your permission. But if you keep circling me, if you drag my family into this again, I will end it. Badge or no badge. Keller stared, breathing hard, then finally stepped back, but his eyes still burned with obsession. I'm not done with you, Green. Not until I know everything. Anthony walked away, heart pounding. He had said more than he should, risked more than he could afford, but he couldn't let Keller believe silence was weakness anymore. At home that night, LaToya looked at him with searching eyes. Did you finally tell him? Anthony froze. Tell who? Keller, did you tell him the truth? Anthony swallowed. Enough of it. Her face was pale. Then it's over. Either he'll destroy you, or he'll destroy us trying. Anthony sat heavily, exhaustion wrapping around him. He had fought shadows his whole life, but this time the shadow wasn't just Keller. It was the creeping fear inside his own home. And for the first time, Anthony wasn't sure which would break first, the sting, Keller, or his family. The Bureau had chalked the dockside sting up as a success, but Anthony knew better. Keller's presence had cracked the surface, and now the fissures spread. Informants hesitated, some whispering they'd been exposed, others vanishing entirely. Every phone call Anthony placed carried silence on the other end, the kind born from fear rather than loyalty. He could feel the network unraveling beneath his fingertips. Collins summoned him to a sterile conference room late one night, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. Washington's restless, he said, his voice tight. They're asking questions about Keller, about you. Anthony's expression didn't shift. I told you, Keller's interference is what nearly burned the docks. Collins leaned forward, eyes sharp. And they're asking if maybe he had reason. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're not sure who to believe. The words landed like a blow. Anthony's chest tightened. After everything I've done, they doubt me because some beat cop can't control his pride? Collins exhaled. Perception matters. If Keller keeps stirring, if your informants keep disappearing, Washington will cut the cord. And when they do, they won't just end the operation. They'll end you. Anthony stood slowly, his voice calm but laced with steel. Then Keller doesn't just threaten me anymore. He threatens the Bureau. Collins didn't argue. He only said, "Figure it out before they decide for you." Keller, meanwhile, had reached a breaking point of his own. His obsession consumed every waking moment. His superiors at the precinct noticed the reports he filed were thinner, his patrol routes shorter, his eyes always elsewhere. When Mercer confronted him in the locker room, Keller snapped. "You're throwing away your career," Mercer said, voice low. "All for one man you can't let go of." Keller shoved his locker shut, face flushed. "You didn't see the docs. Green wasn't just there, he was running it. Maybe the Bureau covers for him, but I won't." Mercer shook his head, pity in his eyes. "You're going to implode, Brian, and when you do, he won't be the one who falls. You will." Keller's jaw clenched, but inside, a seed of truth gnawed at him. He had risked everything for this obsession. Yet instead of backing down, he doubled down. He started leaking whispers, anonymous calls to local journalists, subtle suggestions to city council members, muttered doubts in precinct hallways. Anthony Green isn't who he says. He planted poison-like seeds, waiting for them to grow. LaToya felt the change, too. Neighbors who once waved politely now lingered with suspicious eyes. Parents at the PTA avoided her gaze, their voices hushed when she passed. The shadow Keller cast had stretched until it covered her entire life. One evening, as she folded laundry in the quiet of the bedroom, she heard Jordan's voice from the hall. "Mom, kids at school said Dad's gonna get arrested. Is it true?" LaToya's chest tightened. She knelt, brushing his hair back. "No, baby. Your father isn't a criminal." Jordan's brow furrowed. "Then why does everyone think he is?" She pulled him close, whispering fiercely. "Because people are scared of what they don't understand. But your father isn't what they say. Don't ever forget that." Still, when she looked into Jordan's eyes, she saw the seeds of doubt Keller had planted sprouting in her own son. That night she confronted Anthony. "This can't go on. Keller isn't just after you anymore. He's after us. He's making us pariahs in our own community. Jordan's carrying whispers no child should." Anthony's voice was steady. "It ends when I finish this." Her hands trembled. "Or it ends when I end it for you." Anthony's eyes snapped to hers. "What does that mean?" She looked away, tears brimming. "It means if protecting my son means exposing your truth, I'll do it. Even if it destroys us." Anthony's heart hammered. For the first time, he realized his wife wasn't just a bystander in his secret war. She was a potential threat to it. Keller's sabotage finally collided with the Bureau in the worst way. One of Anthony's most trusted informants, a man known only as Darius, failed to show at a meet. Hours later, Anthony found him beaten in an alley, barely breathing. Through swollen lips, the man gasped, "Cops," asking questions. "Keller," before slipping into unconsciousness. Anthony carried him into a hospital emergency ward under false paperwork, his jaw clenched with rage. Keller's interference wasn't just fraying nerves now, it was drawing blood. Collins met him outside, fury in his eyes. "This is the last straw. Washington's ready to shut you down." Anthony's voice was low, trembling with barely contained anger. "If they shut me down now, Keller wins. He proves he can burn an operation with nothing but his pride." Collins hissed. "Then give me something. Give me a reason to fight for you." Anthony met his eyes. "I'll bring you Keller, not his suspicion, not his whispers, him, proof he crossed the line." Collins studied him, then nodded slowly. "You've got one chance, don't miss it." The chance came sooner than expected. Anthony was driving home late when he noticed Keller tailing him again. Instead of losing him, Anthony led him down winding streets into industrial back roads, until finally he pulled into an abandoned rail yard. Keller followed, headlights sweeping across rusted tracks. Anthony stepped out, calm but deliberate. Keller emerged moments later, hand near his holster. "You brought me here?" Keller spat. "What game are you playing?" Anthony's voice was steady. "No games, just truth. You wanted it? Here it is. You've poisoned my informants, nearly blown federal stings, harassed my family. You crossed every line, Keller." Keller sneered. Because you're dirty and no one else sees it. Anthony stepped closer, his voice cutting. Dirty men don't risk their lives to put criminals in chains. Dirty men don't shield their families from obsession like yours. Look at yourself. You're not exposing me. You're exposing your own downfall. Keller's face flushed, but his voice shook. I'll prove it. I'll find it. Anthony leaned in, voice sharp as a blade. Then know this. Every step you take now isn't toward my ruin. It's toward your own. And when you fall, no one will catch you. For the first time, Keller faltered. Doubt flickered in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but the sound of a car approaching broke the silence. Collins's sedan rolled into the yard, headlights cutting across them. He stepped out, his face cold. You want proof Keller crossed the line? Collins said, voice loud enough for both to hear. He's here, off duty, no clearance, tailing a federal operation. That's obstruction. That's sabotage. Keller's breath hitched. You set me up. Anthony's eyes didn't waver. No, you set yourself up. I just let you follow. Collins's gaze pinned Keller. Walk away now, Keller, or the Bureau will eat you alive. Keller's chest heaved. Rage warred with fear. Finally, he backed toward his cruiser, spitting, This isn't over. Then he was gone, tires screeching into the night. When Anthony returned home, LaToya was waiting in the living room, Jordan asleep upstairs. She studied him carefully. Was it Keller? Anthony nodded. I cornered him. Collins was there. He knows Keller crossed the line. LaToya's eyes searched his face. So it's over? Anthony exhaled, weariness heavy. No. Men like Keller don't stop because you tell them to. They stop when there's nothing left for them to chase. Her lips trembled. And if what's left is us? Anthony closed his eyes, exhaustion and dread intertwining. Then I'll make sure it never comes to that. But deep down he wasn't sure anymore. Keller was slipping, desperate, and desperate men were the most dangerous. That same night, Keller sat in his dark apartment, head in his hands. His shrine to Anthony loomed around him, photos, notes, strings, but for the first time he saw it for what it was. Obsession, self-destruction. Still, when he lifted his head, his eyes hardened again. He's lying. He has to be lying, and I'll prove it. His voice was quiet, but his vow was iron. The days after the rail yard encounter hung heavy with silence. On the surface, life returned to its rhythm. Jordan went to school, LaToya went to work, Anthony attended PTA functions. But beneath, nothing was the same. The neighborhood's whispers still followed them. The tension between husband and wife was raw, and Keller remained out there, simmering in humiliation. Anthony could feel it. He woke each morning with his senses sharpened, as though waiting for a blow that hadn't yet fallen. He scanned mirrors on every drive, checked the porch before stepping outside, lingered at Jordan's bedroom door each night longer than before. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. Keller wasn't done. At the Bureau, Collins confirmed it. He hasn't filed a report since the docks, Collins said in his clipped tone, sliding a folder across the table. But he's been asking questions off the record. Journalists, council members, even a state representative. He's trying to build a case outside the system. Anthony flipped the folder open. Grainy surveillance shots of Keller meeting with people in diners, leaning close in hushed conversations. And they're listening? Anthony asked. Collins shrugged. People like scandals. And Keller's selling one. Anthony closed the folder, jaw tight. Then he's not just after me anymore. He's after the Bureau. Collins met his eyes. And that makes him more dangerous. Desperate men don't care who burns as long as someone does. LaToya felt the desperation too. She moved through the house like a shadow, her nerves fraying with each passing day. One night she confronted Anthony again, her voice trembling with both anger and fear. He won't stop. You know that. He's going to keep pushing until either he exposes you or you destroy him. And either way, we're caught in the middle. Anthony leaned against the wall, exhaustion in his eyes. I know. Her voice cracked. Then what's left for us? Do we wait until he comes crashing through that door? Anthony stepped closer, lowering his voice. No. We wait until I end this. But LaToya shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. I don't want to wait anymore. I want my husband back. I want Jordan's father back. Not this man who carries secrets like chains. Anthony's throat tightened. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. Her distance cut deeper than any bullet. Keller's obsession finally snapped. Humiliation had festered since the rail yard, growing into something toxic. One night, alone in his apartment, he stared at the wall of photos. Anthony at the PTA, Anthony at the docks, Anthony on his porch with LaToya. Keller's face twisted. You don't win, he whispered. Not after everything you've cost me. He grabbed his badge, his gun, and his keys. His hands shook, not from doubt, but from the certainty that he had nothing left to lose. The Green household was quiet that same evening. Jordan was upstairs, headphones on, lost in homework. LaToya sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the muted television. Anthony sat across from her, tie loosened, watching her more than the screen. The knock came sudden and hard, 3 raps that rattled the door. LaToya flinched. Anthony rose slowly, hand brushing the concealed piece at his waist. He opened the door to find Keller standing on the porch, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes wild but steady. Evening, Green, Keller said, voice calm in a way that was more dangerous than any shout. Anthony's voice was low. You shouldn't be here. Keller stepped inside without waiting. LaToya stood, her breath catching. Keller's eyes flicked to her briefly, then back to Anthony. We're ending this tonight. Anthony closed the door softly. You want to destroy me so badly you bring it to my home, with my family here. Keller's lips curled. Your family's been part of this since you dragged them into it. Don't blame me for that. LaToya's voice cut in, trembling but fierce. Get out. Keller ignored her, his gaze locked on Anthony. Tell me the truth. Right now. No bureau spin, no half answers. Who are you really? Anthony's chest rose and fell slowly. I'm a handler. I run informants. I protect them from men who'd kill them if they knew. That's who I am. Keller's eyes burned. And that's supposed to make me back down? After everything? After you humiliated me, turned Collins against me, made me a laughingstock in my own department? Anthony's voice sharpened. No, it's supposed to make you realize you've been chasing a ghost. You wanted me to be dirty because it gave your obsession meaning. But I'm not your meaning, Keller. I'm your mirror, and you can't stand what you see. The words struck like a lash. Keller's face twisted, his hand tightening near his weapon. LaToya gasped, moving toward Anthony. Stop this. Both of you. Jordan's upstairs. He can't hear this. Anthony's voice lowered, dangerous. You come into my house with a gun, Keller. You cross a line you can't walk back from. Keller's voice cracked with rage. Then give me something. Anything that proves I'm not insane for chasing you this far. Anthony stepped closer, his eyes unwavering. The only thing insane is thinking you can tear apart a family, a community, a federal operation, and call it justice. Keller's hand twitched, his breath ragged. For a moment, the room was a hair's breadth from exploding. Then Jordan's voice drifted down the stairs. Dad? Mom? What's happening? The sound froze them. LaToya rushed to the stairs. Go back to your room, baby. It's nothing. Jordan's eyes were wide, frightened. Why's Officer Keller here? Keller looked at the boy, his rage flickering into something else. Shame. Regret. The faintest crack in his armor. His hand slipped from his holster. He swallowed hard, stepping back. Anthony seized the moment. Look at him, Keller. Look at what you've done. You think you're chasing me, but you've been chasing yourself into a pit you can't climb out of. You're standing in my house, terrifying a child. Tell me how that's justice. Keller's eyes darted between Anthony, LaToya, and Jordan. His shoulders sagged. For the first time, the fire in his eyes dimmed. He turned toward the door, voice hollow. "This isn't over." Anthony's voice followed him. "It has to be." Keller didn't reply. He left, the door slamming behind him. Days later, Collins called Anthony into his office. "Keller's been pulled off duty. Internal Affairs is circling. Washington's satisfied for now, but this isn't a clean victory. You'll be watched too." Anthony nodded. "I expected that." Collins studied him. "What about your family?" Anthony's jaw tightened. "That's the battle I still have to win." At home, Latoya sat across from him at the kitchen table. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, she spoke. "You ended it with him, but you didn't end it with us. You can't keep carrying secrets like weapons and expect us not to bleed." Anthony reached for her hand, his voice quiet. "Then tell me how to start again." Her eyes softened, though doubt still lingered. "Start by being here. Not the handler, not the shadow, just Anthony, just Jordan's father." My husband Anthony's chest ached. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to breathe. Keller sat alone in his dark apartment, his badge on the table, his gun beside it. The walls still bore Anthony's photos, strings dangling like loose ends. He stared at them, hollow. His career was crumbling. His obsession had cost him everything, and yet, when he whispered into the silence, his voice still carried the old fire. "He's hiding something." "I know it. I'll prove it." But the words rang hollow even to himself. For Anthony, the storm had passed, but the scars remained. Keller was broken but not gone. Washington was appeased but not forgiving, and Latoya's trust was fractured but not lost. The family sat together at the dinner table one evening. Anthony, Latoya, and Jordan, sharing laughter that felt tentative, fragile. Anthony knew the shadows would always linger, but for now, they had this moment. And for a man who had nearly lost everything, that was enough. The Green family had learned to live in uneasy silence. Weeks passed since Keller had stormed into their home, and on the surface things seemed calmer. The whispers in the neighborhood quieted. PTA meetings carried on, and Keller's name faded from the gossip. Yet Anthony felt it in his bones. The calm wasn't peace. It was the brittle pause before the final shatter. Collins confirmed his instinct in a terse phone call. "Keller's off duty, suspended pending IA, but he's still circling. He's leaking to journalists, claiming he uncovered bureau corruption. Washington is nervous. If he keeps going, your name will hit headlines before we can contain it." Anthony's jaw tightened. "Then stop him." Collins's voice lowered. "We can't. He's gone rogue. That makes him unpredictable. If he drags your family into this again, it's out of our hands." Anthony hung up, his hand trembling despite years of training. He knew what Collins hadn't said aloud. If Keller forced exposure, the Bureau would cut Anthony loose to save itself. Keller sat alone in a motel on the edge of town. His world collapsed into a stack of papers, grainy photographs, and a half-dead recorder. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands restless. He had been suspended, stripped of authority, but in his mind, the fight wasn't over. "They all protect you, Green," he muttered, staring at a photo of Anthony at the PTA. "But I'll be the one who shows the truth." His last move was desperate but clear. He had secured a meeting with a local reporter, one hungry for scandal. If Keller couldn't beat Green with a badge, he would destroy him in the court of public opinion. The meeting took place in the corner of a diner, rain streaking the windows outside. The reporter, a young man with eager eyes, leaned in as Keller laid out photos, notes, whispered details. "He's dirty," Keller hissed. "He runs with criminals." "I saw it with my own eyes," the reporter's brow furrowed. "Do you have hard proof?" Keller's hand slammed on the table. "I am the proof. I've spent months tracking him, following him, watching him slip through the cracks while the Bureau shields him." The reporter hesitated. Doubt flickered, but the hunger for a story was stronger. He nodded. "I'll look into it." Keller's smile was thin, manic. Do more than look. Print it, tear his mask off. But what Keller didn't know was that Collins had bugged his phone weeks earlier. Anthony and a small bureau team listened from a van parked across the street. Anthony's voice was flat. He's about to set fire to everything. Collins nodded grimly. This is your chance. End it clean, or don't bother coming back. Anthony waited until Keller left the diner, rain slicking his jacket. He stepped from the shadows, blocking Keller's path. For a moment, the streetlights painted them like opponents in a ring. Keller, Anthony said softly. The officer froze, eyes narrowing. You spying on me now? Anthony's voice was calm, steady. No, I'm stopping you from destroying more lives than you already have. Keller's laugh was bitter. You're good. I'll give you that. Smooth words, steady hands. But I know what you are. Anthony stepped closer, his voice low. And what am I? Keller's eyes burned. A liar, a fraud, a man hiding behind his family while he runs games no one sees. Anthony's gaze sharpened. No, Keller. I'm the man cleaning up what cops like you can't touch. And you've nearly gotten people killed trying to prove otherwise. You think this is about me, but it's always been about you, your pride, your obsession, your need to matter. Keller's breath came ragged. His hand twitched near his belt where his suspended badge no longer hung. You think you've won? Anthony's voice hardened. This isn't about winning. It's about ending, and tonight it ends. The standoff might have ignited then, but headlights swung into the street. LaToya's car screeched to a halt, her door flinging open. She ran toward them, rain plastering her hair, eyes blazing. Stop it, she screamed. Both of you. This isn't about badges or secrets. It's about us. My son is upstairs at home, terrified every time he hears your names, and I won't let you destroy what's left of this family. Keller blinked, startled by her fury. Anthony reached for her, but she shook him off. Her voice cut sharp through the rain. You want truth, Keller? Here's the truth. I'm done being silent. You step near my son again, I'll drag your obsession into the light myself. And if that means burning every secret Anthony's kept, so be it. Her words froze both men. For the first time, Anthony saw Keller falter, not because of him, but because of her. Keller's jaw worked, his rage suddenly hollow. His eyes flicked from Anthony to LaToya, then to the rain-slick street. Without another word, he turned and walked into the night, shoulders hunched, his obsession finally cracking under the weight of her defiance. Back at home, LaToya sat at the kitchen table, soaked and trembling. Anthony stood across from her, silent. Finally, she spoke. I chose tonight. I chose Jordan. I chose us. If you want me to keep choosing you, then you stop letting shadows run our lives. Anthony's voice broke. I can't quit the bureau. Her eyes softened, though pain lingered. Then don't quit. But don't shut us out. Secrets don't protect families, they poison them. Anthony swallowed hard, nodding. Then no more poison. For the first time in months, her hand slid into his. Fragile, but real. Keller's fate came quickly. Collins informed Anthony days later. IA closed the file. Keller's out. Badge revoked. Career over. The reporter won't run his story without proof. He's finished. Anthony exhaled slowly. And us? Collins shrugged. Washington satisfied. For now, but green. This won't be the last time. Men like Keller aren't the only ones who hate what we do. Anthony nodded, accepting the truth. But in his heart, he felt something shift. For once, the war outside hadn't cost him the war inside his own home. Weeks later, Anthony sat in the PTA auditorium again. Parents buzzed about bake sales and field trips. Jordan sat proudly beside him, smiling as his basketball coach praised his progress. LaToya leaned against Anthony's shoulder, her hand entwined with his. Across the room, Clarence Miller caught Anthony's eye and nodded, respect and understanding in the gesture. As Principal Doyle called the meeting to order, Anthony let his gaze sweep the room. The same folding chairs, the same fluorescent lights, but everything was different. The storm had passed, the shadow had lifted, and for the first time in months, he felt what Keller never could: peace.